Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is a rather dubious revelations by the Ferret website about oil industry and SNP lobbyists. Some weird things happening now. Before I start, just give a wee bit of a plug to the Ferret website. I've came across it a few times, and it's rather interesting place where I'll just go back to their actual intro page. They're basically trying to uncover the truth behind who makes decisions in Scotland. And what's the driving forces behind the decisions that are made about and in Scotland. And it says, have you ever wondered who really runs Scotland? Help us find out by supporting our campaign. And I think that's quite a worthwhile campaign, to be perfectly honest with you. However, today's story, and I'll put a link in the description so you can read it and have a look at their website, because it is an interesting place to wander about, is their website. And this story today that they've just published this morning by Paul Dobson and Rob Edwards goes along. Lobbying on behalf of the oil industry by a former SNP spin doctor has sparked fears that the Scottish Government could be about to abandon its opposition to new oil exploration in the North Sea. Now that in itself, that one paragraph, right, I think, oh, go for it, right? I'm quite neutral in the whole thing, right? See if you can find alternative to oil, which might be cheaper to get, might lead to cheaper bills, possibly better for the environment. Great, right? Crack on. But my big fear about the oil industry being scrapped is the devastation it could have, not only in their economy, but on the people that work in it. I know a lot of people that work offshore, and that number's been growing recently with people I know just joining the industry. So I've got concerns about, well, if you're going to bin it, then what happens next? Not only to these people, but the economy in general, the cost of bills. What's the end game if we do scrap it, right? The other thing that fascinates me about this whole story is, if that one paragraph is true, that the Scottish Government could be about to abandon opposition to new oil exploration, bang goes the wee cuddle fest with the Scottish Greens. And I believe that would lead us to an almost immediate election for Scottish Parliament, which I would think a fantastic thing, because SNP couldn't afford one, right? So anyway, back to the story. The Ferret can reveal that a public relations firm ran by previously senior SNP officials has lobbied the government for the oil giant Shell. It has also met with John Swinney and Kate Forbes before they became First Minister and Deputy First Minister in May 2024. Campaigners are concerned that the new Scottish Government leadership is considering dropping the proposed presumption against new exploration for oil and gas from its energy strategy. They attacked well-paid lobbyists working on behalf of greedy fossil fuel companies. You see that word as well, fossil fuels? I'm starting to think, well, what does that mean? And how's that even a possible thing? I don't know if the word actually describes the oil and gas in the correct manner, but I'll leave that debate for another day, because that should tip into conspiracy theory things almost. And I'd rather just stay where I'm doing now. But anyway, that's a thought. If it's fossil and it's generated from dead plants and animals from hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of years ago, how come you need to go to the middle of the North Sea to find it? Right? I don't think, how's there all that stuff under the ground and it's only in offshore? Surely there would be somewhere nearer and easier to get to if that was fossils. Anyway, that's another argument for another day. The Scottish Greens warned that oil companies don't hire lobbyists to be nice. The revolving door between polluting industries and government must be stopped, they say. It's actually nice and refreshing to hear the Scottish Greens going on about something that's an environmental thing as opposed to gender, etc. However, the public relations firm True North said that it works with Shell supported the fossil fuel giant's long-term contribution to domestic energy security through oil and gas. Shell was key to energy transition projects and backed carbon capture in offshore wind. The company argued the Scottish Government stressed the importance of meeting with major industries and reiterated its commitment to net zero by 2045. In January 2023, the Scottish Government announced a consultation on whether, in order to support the fastest possible and most effective just transition, there should be the presumption against new exploration for oil and gas. This was strongly backed by Scottish Greens, who were in coalition government with the SNP at the time. Now, this is where I am with this whole thing, right? When your aim is net zero, that doesn't mean you'll not produce any carbon, any pollution, or anything like that. It's to have net zero. So you do something to negate the negatives and, have the whole thing hitting zero, as the name suggests. Net zero, not zero, right? It's a big difference. So I've always thought, well, why do we need to stop oil exploration, stop gas exploration, if we could find ways of negating any of the pollution, carbon, etc. caused by these things? It doesn't necessarily mean you bin oil. It doesn't necessarily mean you bin gas or coal and all these things. It just means you need to find a way of negating any issues that they cause. But those who are more emotional about the whole net zero thing than me tend to want to bang the drum that just end gas, end oil, end coal, all these things are just to stop, right? When that's not actually their aim. Their aim is to get to net zero. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if oil and gas are terrible at polluting, which I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but if you just stop them, that'll bring it down. But you could also think other ways of filling the deficit. But that doesn't seem to cross their mind. It's just stop the oil, stop the gas, stop the, go in and try and smash a cabinet with a Magna Carta, because that'll get you net zero. That'll stop oil, yeah? No, just get a chill pill, right? We don't need to be so disruptive and try to achieve our aims. Why not just try and think out the box a wee bit and see, plant some trees or something? Oh, no, that's right. We chopped 17 million of them down, and when we're trying to get to net zero, we're putting wind turbines up, Anyhow, I digress. Where did we get to? The Scottish Government does not have the power to prevent licensing of new oil and gas projects. There's an interesting development. That lies with Westminster, but the policy has a symbolic importance. But since the Greens were ejected from government in April 2024 and Swinney and Forbes have ascended to power, there are concerns that the presumption could be dropped. Swinney declined to back it in the BBC Good Morning Scotland interview on the 13th of May. True North was launched in 2022, this is the spin doctor company, I believe, by former SNP Head of Communications Fergus Much and former First Minister Alex Salmond's Chief of Staff, Jeff Aberdeen, who also co-hosts the Holyrood Sausage podcast. They are the firm's managing partners. The Scottish Parliament Lobby Register disclosed that Much met with the Scottish Government's Chief of Staff, Colin McAllister, twice to help promote Shell Views late 2023. The first meeting was at the Scottish Parliament on the 27th of September to discuss the future of North Sea oil and gas. According to the lobbying register, that included its role within the wider context of Scotland's energy transition and how Shell was diversifying its role. Another entry in the register says that Shell's corporate relations manager, Patrick McCloskey, was also present. One of the topics under discussion was Shell's role in continuing to provide the energy the UK needs. The same topics were discussed at a second meeting with McAllister in the Scottish Parliament on the 7th of December. This involved Much, McCloskey and Shell's corporate relations advisor, David Shaw. The Ferret previously reported that True North organised a dinner in Aberdeen on the 7th of September 2023, enabling oil and gas companies to lobby the then First Minister Humza Yousaf. Those invited include Shell, BP and North Sea oil firm Ithaca, hope I pronounced that right, Energy, which is linked to a company selling fuel to, God forbid, the Israeli Defence Forces in Gaza. Guests, that's going to really upset the Greens, isn't it? So many different levels. Guests at the dinner complained to Yousaf that the oil industry was being demonised and suffered from a lack of visible support. Kind of agree with that. They also attacked the Scottish Government's proposed presumption against oil and gas exploration as damaging. Correct, I could agree with that as well. On behalf of True North, Much and his fellow managing partner Jeff Aberdeen also lobbied the then Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, and others on the 9th of October 22. Discussions were over dinner at the Mary Coulter House Hotel in Aberdeen, sounds nice, along with representatives from many other North East businesses. And I can imagine other North East businesses that aren't directly linked to oil and gas exploration can see a benefit in keeping oil and gas exploration going because, Aberdeen, I've lived and worked up there for a short term back in 2002. And it's got a wealthy city. And although not everybody works in oil and gas, the economy is driven by it. So your guy that's a newsagent, the guy that sells beer in the bar, the guy that, the restaurants, all these other non-directly connected industries obviously get a spin-off from oil and gas. The lobbying register records that Much and Aberdeen raised the importance of recognising the oil and gas industry and how the supply chain will key role in accelerating the drive to net zero. Aberdeen also held a video conference with the then Finance Secretary Kate Forbes on the 5th of July 2022, emphasising the promotion of North East of Scotland as world-leading catalyst for energy transition. On this occasion, he was lobbying on behalf of ETZ, a publicly funded energy transition company in Aberdeen, backing offshore wind, carbon capture and green hydrogen. It's chaired by oil tycoon Sir Ian Wood. In April, Much and Aberdeen both welcomed the ending of the Bute House Agreement, which brought the Greens into the Scottish Government. I can imagine why two guys that work on behalf of the oil industry would be happy with that. I also welcomed that, and I don't even work in the oil and gas industry. Much was strongly opposed to the coalition, urging the SNP to nuke the deal with the Greens in September 23. In March 24, he encouraged the SNP to max out domestic production while we still need oil and gas. True North's role in seeking to influence Scottish Government policy on oil has infuriated environmental campaign groups. Well, it would, wouldn't it? True North are very well paid lobbyists working on behalf of greedy fossil fuel companies, all profiting from pushing people into fuel poverty, and destruction of our climate. Big claims by Caroline Rance from Friends of the Earth Scotland. There's always these keywords that they use: greed, fossil fuel, which I don't understand, and I'll need to educate myself more on the accurate description used by that. Profiting from people, pushing people into fuel poverty, destruction of our climate. These key words that Caroline Rance from the Friends of the Earth used, they're always using these types of words, and you go, oh God, that must be a bad thing. Well, is it? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. All I know is these people over here that want these people over here to stop producing oil and gas always use quite frightening words, but don't normally back it up with much fact. It's just words. They're cynical, there's another word, plan to keep Scottish households trapped, there's another one, in fossil, there's another one, fuel-powered energy system that only benefits their paymasters. I'm going to do that every time there's one of these mad words, right? Their attempts to whisper in the ears of politicians must be rejected by John Swinney and his ministers. If the energy strategy contains yet more oil and gas, we'll know he has been influenced by the fossil fuel lobby rather than the needs of the people who he represents as the First Minister. Tough talking, Caroline. But I don't know if I believe you. The campaign group Uplift urged Scottish ministers to ignore well-connected fossil fuel lobbyists in favour of the public need for a livable planet. True North seems to have been busy on Shell's behalf, said the group's executive Tessa Khan. Don't know who Uplift are. Probably get paid money off somebody in a grant just to talk shite. But it is the job of government, the First Ministers, to put the needs of the public before the profit-seeking demands of big multinationals. This means sticking with the presumption against new drilling to tackle the climate crisis. This just means alert, right? Because it's just words that they use. The Green SNP, Mark Ruskell, said, now this is unusual because Mark Ruskell's just about to talk about environmental things. which is really unusual for the environmental party called the Greens, because normally they just go on about sex and gender issues. That seems to be their thing now, right? So it's actually quite refreshing to hear Mark Ruskell actually discuss climate things, whether they're right or wrong remains to be seen. Oil and gas companies don't employ lobbying companies to be nice. They do it for their contacts and their influence in the corridors of power. With the climate crisis getting more urgent by the day crisis, it's more important than ever that we stop the revolving door between polluting industries and government. Environmental policy must be based on science. Okay. Not the bank balances and lobbying power of companies like Shell. See, a guy that represents any party that cannot accept the cash report as science and wants to question that has no right whatsoever to tell anybody that they must base any decisions on science when they refuse to. So do us a favour, Mark, shut up. The True North said it was privileged to support a wide range of business, particularly in energy, or work with Shell, a company which employs 1,200 people across Scotland. I thought it would be more than that. Supports their long-standing contribution to domestic energy security through oil and gas, as well as their role in key energy transition projects, said the company spokesman. Shell interests include carbon capture. Now, these are the things that I was talking about earlier, and storage, as well as offshore wind projects. And the company pointed out our energy industry is of critical economic importance to the North East, Scottish and UK economies. The spokesperson added the critical mass of skills, expertise and financial capital that the industry will be an essential driver of an accelerated transition to net zero. True North will continue to give our full support to Scotland's productive, pioneering, truly world-class energy sector. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. To get to net zero, you don't have to stop oil and gas. Well, I'm suggesting you might not need to stop. What you do is you look at other things that can balance any, if there are any, risks in pollution and carbon and all these things that the Greens are scared of. Well, let's look at ways of bringing that balance. That don't mean you just bin the oil fields. The Scottish Government did not comment on proposed presumption against new oil and gas exploration. It is important that Scottish Government meet with a diverse range of organisations, including representatives of major employers and industry, in the course of our service to Scotland, said the spokesperson. The Scottish Government is fully committed to a just transition, climate resilience and net zero Scotland by 2045. Shell did not respond to the request to comment. That's fine. And in summary, it's just, I hope the SNP have been too quick and easily led to this oil and gas is bad thing, when those of us who have a memory from 2014 can remember it was one of the main drivers, excuses and reasons given to have an independent Scotland. Then, when we moved away from this oil's good to oil's bad, some people actually clean forgot and denied that it was any part of the push for the Yes campaign back in 2014. Actually, no, we didn't do that. Quite blatantly, no, that wasn't what it was all about. It was, right? But we seem to want to rewrite history because we went, oh, it's a bad thing. Now, if the SNP have decided to go reality check, one, it might not be as bad as we always were getting told or led to believe it is, and two, it forms quite a big important part of any Scottish economy, regardless of whether that's an independent Scottish economy or not, then I don't think that's a bad thing. And the other, it's a sort of it's a double dunner for me, because I understand the importance they need to get support from somebody, and the somebody now is the Greens. And when they say, well, oil and gas isn't that bad, we might not be binning it after all, they would obviously lose that support. But this type of thing, I would imagine, would, if they wanted to, gain support from Alba, who seem more open to suggest that things like Grangemouth should be protected and the jobs there in the refinery. However, the Scottish National Party seem to be taking personality over politics with the Alba question, where they just can't have anything to do with them because Alex Salmond is leading that party and running that party. So it would really be a funny game of chess going on should they adopt this publicly, where they're saying, well, oil and gas might not be the worst thing after all. And I think it's the right thing to do. I think to embrace it a bit more would make sense for Scotland. And my wish for the wee tagline I dreamt up the other day halfway through a video where I said, let's manage Scotland and look at it as a business, right, as opposed to a fantasy, and sort out the job. So I think for let's manage Scotland theory, it would make perfect sense that we embraced and didn't just isolate and demonise an industry that's been particularly good at providing jobs and wealth for the Scottish people. And if we've got thousands and tens of thousands of Scottish guys working offshore making a few quid, then they spend it in Scotland. And by the way, the mad thing is, they've only got 6 months to spend it, so they go kind of mental, right? I've seen it. Pals that work in the industry. And they like to, share the wealth, and particularly in pubs. However, they buy things, they improve their house, they buy furniture, they buy cars, and the whole money goes back into the economy and makes it better. And I would hate to see that being taken away or reduced. So, let's manage Scotland, and let's not just ignore oil and gas just yet. Okay, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. But most importantly of all, unless you're any of the SNP that still hate oil and gas, or these crackpots and Scottish Greens that don't know whether they want to cuddle trees or tell us to change our gender, everybody else have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.